Most of you know, probably all of you know, Rabbi Bloom is out of town for one more week, so I'm filling in. I'm Marshall Langfeld, a congregant, and so we'll all join in and bring in Shabbat together. We're going to start on page 5. Shiru Ladonai Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai Kol Haaretz, Shiru Ladonai Baruch Shema Basru Miyom Liyom Yeshuata Sapru Bagoyim Kevoda B'Kol Ha'amim Nifleotav Ki Gadol Adonai Umhulal Me'od Norahu Al Kol Elohim Yainai Ki Kol Elohim Elilim Ba'adonai Shamayim Asa Od Behadar Lefanav Oz B'Tiferet B'Mikdasho Habu Ladonai Mishpechat Amim Habu Ladonai Kavod Ba'oz Habu Ladonai Kevod Shemo Seu Mincha Uvo Lechatzrotav Yainai Ishtachavu Ladonai Behadra Kodesh Chilu Mipanav Kol Haaretz Imru Bagoyim Adonai Malach Hafti Kom Tevel Bahal Timod Yadin Amim B'mei Sharim Yismachu Hashemayim B'tagel Haaretz Yiram Hayam Umelo Yalo Sadai V'chol Asher Bo Yainai Az Yiranenu Kalat Seyar Lifnei Adonai Kiva Lishbot Haaretz Yishbot Tevel B'tzedek Ve'amim be'emunato Yanai Turn to page 12 for Romamu in the middle of the page. Romamu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romamu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Romamu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Romamu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu lehar kodsho. Page 13. Mizmor leDavid Habu Ladonai b'nei Elim Habu Ladonai Kavod Ba'oz Yainai Habu Ladonai Kevod Shemo Ishtachavu Ladonai V'hadra Kodesh Kol Adonai Al Hamayim El HaKavod Yirim Adonai Al Mayim Rabim Kol Adonai Ba'koach Yainai Kol Adonai Behadar Kol Adonai Shober Arazim V'shaber Adonai V'tarzei Habanon V'yarkidem Kemo Egel Lebanon V'Sirion Kemo Ben Re'emim Yainai Kol Adonai Chotzev Lavotesh Kol Adonai Yachel Midbar Yachil Adonai Midbar Kadesh Kol Adonai Yechol Elayalot Vayechesov Yeharot Ubechalo Kulo Omer Kavod Yai Nai Nai Adonai Lama Hu Yoshav Yeshev Adonai Melech Leolam Adonai Oz Le'amo Yitein Adonai Yevarech Et Amo B'Shalom Yai Nai 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 Yai Nai 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 Yai Nai 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 Yai Nai 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 Yai Nai 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 Okay, Lachado D is on page 15. We'll do the first two and last two verses. Lechado di likrakala pene Shabbat nekabela. Lechado di likrakala pene Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachur b'dibur achad hishmiyanu el hamiuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad l'shemo tiferet v'litila lechado di likrakala pene Shabbat nekabela. Lechado di likrakala pene Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'necha ki mekor ha'baracha merosh mikedem nesucha sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. Lechado di likrat kala pene Shabbat nekabela. Lechado di likrat kala pene Shabbat nekabela. Yaminu smolti froti v'yata Adonai ta'ariti al yadish v'parti v'nismecha v'nagila. Lechado di likrat kala pene Shabbat nekabela. Lechado di likrat kala pene Shabbat nekabela. Rise and face the entrance as we welcome the Shabbat bride. Boi v'shalom ateret bala gam b'simcha u'v'tzahala toch emunei am segula. Boi chala lechado di likrat kala pene Shabbat nekabela. Lechado di likrat kala pene Shabbat nekabela. You can be seated. And for any mourners who might be with us tonight, Hamakomi Nechem Etchem B'tov Shar Havlei Tzion Yerushalayim. May God comfort you among the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. We are on page 19. Mizmor shir liyom haShabbat tov lehodot la'Adonai ulezamer l'shimcha elyon ulezamer l'shimcha elyon lahagid b'boker chastecha ve'emunacha b'leilot alei asar v'alei navel alei higayon b'chinot. Mizmor shir liyom haShabbat tov lehodot la'Adonai ulezamer l'shimcha elyon ulezamer l'shimcha elyon. Continue silently. Tzadika tamar yifrach be'eretz balvanam yizkeh shetulim bebeit Adonai bechatzrot Adonai malach geut lavesh, lavesh Adonai osi tazarav tikon tevel bal timot, nachon kisacha meaz meolam ata, nasu narot Adonai, nasu narot kolam, isu narot doch yam, mi kolot mayim, mayim rabim adirim, mishperei yam, adir bamarom Adonai. Edotecha nehemnu meod levetecha naba kodesh Adonai leorech yamim. Please rise on page 22 for the Baruch Hu, the formal call to prayer. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. You can be seated. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidbaro ma'ariv harabim. Borei yom v'layla, so golelo mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or, ma'avir yom v'mei layla, ma'avdil ben yom v'mei layla, Adonai tzavaot shemo, el chai v'kayam, tamid yimlach aleinu le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, ha'ma'ariv harabim. Page 24. Ahavat olam beit Yisrael amchavta, Torah u'mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim otanu limadeta. Hakein Adonai Eloheinu b'shachveinu u'kumeinu nasiach b'chukecha. V'nismach b'divrei Toratecha u'b'mitzvotecha li'olam va'ed. Ki hem chayenu v'yorech yameinu u'bahem negei yom ha'balayla. V'yavakcha al tasir mimenu li'olami. Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael. Page 25. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, v'chol lebavcha, v'chol nafshecha, v'chol me'otecha, v'hayu hadvarim ha'eleh. Asher Anachi mitzavcha hayom alevavecha v'shinatam levanecha v'dibarta ban v'shitecha v'beitecha v'laktecha v'aderech v'shachlecha v'kumecha v'kshartam liot al yadecha v'hayu l'totafot beinenecha v'ktabtam al mezuzot beitecha v'bisharecha. I'll continue silently. Leman tizkaru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'yitem kedoshim Elohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem Elohim ani Adonai Elohechem Adonai Elohechem emet. Let's read together at the bottom of 31. I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute about Pinchas, which is the parsha we're reading. There's a little bit of a parallel here to Nachshon, who kind of stands up and does something on his own. When the people of Israel stood at the Red Sea, no tribe wanted to be the first to go into the sea. While they were standing around arguing, Nahshon, the son of Amminadab of the tribe of Judah, leaped forward and dove in first. Because it was Nahshon who leaped forward, the tribe of Judah was to obtain a special place in God's sanctuary. Let us follow the example of Nahshon, taking a leap of action and observing commandments, appreciating freedom, and being open to the miraculous. Let's try a different one. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osefele, malchutecha ra'uvanecha bokei hayam lifnei Moshe, ze'eli anu v'yamru, Adonai yimloch le'olam ba'ed. Ne'amar ki fadar Adonai et Yaakov, u'galu miyad chazak mimenu, baruch atah Adonai, Ka'al Yisrael. We're on page 33, Ashkivenu. Ashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, v'hamidenu malkeinu l'chaim. Ashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, v'hamidenu malkeinu l'chaim. Ushmor tzetenu, uvoenu, l'chaim u'shalom me'ata v'yad olam. Ashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, v'hamidenu malkeinu l'chaim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, v'al kol amo Yisrael, v'al Yerushalayim. Please rise in the middle of page 34 for V'shamru. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, lasot et ha-Shabbat l'torotam berit olam. Beini u'bein b'nei Yisrael, oti li'olam, oti li'olam, oti li'olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, lasot et ha-Shabbat l'torotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, lasot et ha-Shabbat l'torotam berit olam. Ubayam hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, lasot et ha-Shabbat l'torotam berit olam. We'll remain standing for the Chatzi Kaddish on 35. Yikadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbav, Yomad Yirach Yirteh v'yamlich malchuteh, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayeh d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'gala ba'gala u'bizman kariv imeru, Yehei shmei Rabbav mevorach, li'olam u'amei omaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitmar v'yivramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalo shemei l'kudesha v'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiram v'yama v'imeru. Amen. We'll continue with the silent Hamidah. It begins on page 37. going to continue with the Makbeh Tefillah on page 49. Vayachulu hashamayim v'ha'aretz v'chol tzivam vayachal Elohim bayom hashvi'i melachto asher asa vayishbor bayom hashvi'i mikol melachto asher asa vayavarach Elohim et yom hashvi'i vayakadesh oto Ki v'shavat mikol melachto asher bara Elohim lasod. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Konei Shamayim ha'aretz, Magin Avot bidbaro. Mechayim etim b'ma'amaro Ha'el HaKadosh she'en kamohu Hameniach li'amo B'yom Shabbat kadsho Kivam ratza lehaniach lahem Kivam ratza lehaniach lahem Lefanav nabod be'irav ha'fachad Nodeh lishmo b'cho yom tamid me'en El HaHodahot Adon HaShalom Mekadesh HaShabbat Uvarech Shavi Umeniach B'Kedusha L'Amedu Shnei Oneg Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshit Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu Retzeh V'Imnuchatenu Kachenu b'mitzvotecha B'tein chalkenu b'toratecha Sabenu mitubecha V'samchenu b'shuatecha V'taher libenu Li'avdecha b'emet V'hanchilenu Adonai Eloheinu B'ahava u'beratzon Shabbat kodshecha V'yanuchu Yisrael Mekadshei shemecha Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. Kaddish Shalem, page 53. Ikadal v'ikadash shemei rabbah, v'yom divrach erteh, v'yom nikmach l'teh, v'chayechon v'yom echon, v'chayet l'chol beit Yisrael, v'agalav izman karev v'imeru, yehei shmei rabbah mevorach, v'yalam olam me'omaya yitbarach, yitbarach yishtabach, yitbar v'rumam yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitaleh shemei dekudashah, le'elam yikover chatav v'shiratav, tushmechatav v'nechematav, damiran me'alma v'imeru, Tikabel Tzalaton Nevaton L'Kol Yisrael Kadom Avahon V'Yishmaya V'imeru Yehesh Lama Rabba Min Shemaya V'Chayim Aleinu V'Yakol Yisrael V'imeru Oseh Shalom V'Rama V'Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'Yakol Yisrael V'Yakol Yoshvei Tevel V'imeru. All right. So I told you earlier, I'm going to say a few words about our Torah portion this week, which is Pinchas. Which is in the book of Bamidbar, also called Numbers. And the Parsha begins just a brief little synopsis with a reward for Pinchas from his actions in the last Parsha, which I'm going to talk about in a second. We take another census of all the tribes. We have an appeal to Moshe by the daughters of Zelophehad, which is one of the central stories within this Parsha. And finally, a bunch of instructions about sacrifices for Rosh Chodesh and the holidays. And so it's not actually the most exciting parsha in the Torah, in my opinion, but we do read it a lot because every Rosh Chodesh we read a part of this, and on all the holidays we read a part of it. So it gets a lot of action in terms of our reading. So where we pick up our story here, last week in Balak, we were introduced to Pinchas, who is the grandson of Aaron and the son of Elazar. And the Israelites are almost ready to enter the promised land, but as usual, their behavior backslides, and they begin having promiscuous relations with Moabite women, which is bad enough. and praying to their god Baal, which is even much worse. And because of their behavior, they get their just desserts, which is a deadly plague. And then they continue with this, and one couple, who isn't named in Balak, but is named in Parshas Pinchas, goes so far as to have relations right in front of the tent of meeting, in front of Moshe and the rest of the assembly, which was really an act of great defiance. Pinchas, without asking permission or yielding to someone higher up on the food chain, takes action on his own. He takes a spear, he runs them both through with one fell swoop in an act of zealotry. And as a result, we find out at the beginning of the Parsha, this all happened last in Balak when he ran them through. We don't really know what happened until this Parsha. We find that the plague is stopped, and then Balak ends. Okay, so the story now continues. We learn that Pinchas is actually rewarded for this act by God. Not only has the plague stopped, avoiding the potential extinction of the Israelites, because this plague was very severe, it was going to wipe them all out, in which case we wouldn't even be here tonight. But Pinchas is appointed a Kohen, and the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. And there was something I had a question about this, because I said he's the grandson of Aaron. The Kohanim are supposed to be all descendants, direct descendants of Aaron, so why wasn't he already a Kohen? And what I found out was that when God designated Aaron and his sons to be Kohanim, it was only Aaron and his sons. Anyone else, grandsons that were alive at that time, did not get appointed. So anyone who was born later did. So that's why he wasn't a Kohen. So Pinchas gets rewarded, and it doesn't seem like in the Torah that there's any problem with the fact that he took matters into his own hands. Even in the Talmud, when they talk about this, the discussion was if he would have asked the rabbinical court before he took this action, if it was okay, the answer would have been no. There would have been a bunch of prerequisites that he would have had to try first, and so are we supposed to conclude that the end justifies the means, or what's going on here? So after all, the plague ended, the people were saved, and Pinchas got rewarded. He became a high priest. But what we find, and some of this actually is in the commentary in the Eitz Chaim, which I thought was pretty good, but there are some clues that maybe that's not the case. So if in the Torah scroll itself, the way it's written, Pinchas's name, which is in verse 11, the Hebrew letters that start his name are a Pei, a Yud, and a Nun. And the Yud is really small. Okay, and there's a lot of these things in the Torah where there are things written in a strange way, and they're symbolic of something, and then there are different interpretations of what it means. So in this case, the letter Yud, one of the interpretations says is short for Adonai or Hashem, and it's also short for Yehudi or Jew. And the letter is smaller because when we commit violence, the godliness within us is diminished. So they wrote it smaller. So I kind of like that explanation. And then tagging onto that theme in the next verse, in verse 12, the word shalom appears. And within the word shalom, there's a vav, and the vav is broken in the middle. It's kind of hard to see, but when you actually look in the Torah scroll, that's what it is. Again, symbolically, the break symbolizes the peace, which is what shalom means. When it's attempted through violent means, it's flawed and incomplete. So some nice symbolism there that maybe what he did, even though he got rewarded, there are some caveats with that. So with that, let's all hope that the violence in our world can be diminished and we can work towards a lasting and complete peace. Shabbat shalom. Baruch Tiyah. Okay, we will continue with the Kiddush. And let's please rise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodesh b'ahava v'ratzon infilanu zikaron l'maaseh b'reishit ki hu yom tefillah l'mikra'ei kodesh sefer l'tziat mitzrayim ki banu v'afarta v'yotanu ki dashta mikol ha'amim B'Shabbat Kodecha B'Ahava U'Ratzon Hinchalton Baruch Atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. Chaim. So if you are near your children or anyone else that you would care to bless, for boys we say, Yisipcha Elohim K'Ephraim B'Kim Menashe. For girls, Yisipcha Elohim K'Sara Rivka Rachel V'Leah. Yivarech Adonai V'Yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai Panav Elecha V'Chuneka. Yisar Adonai Panav Elecha V'Yasem Lecha Shalom. May God bless you and keep you. May God's face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May God lift the divine face towards you and grant you peace. And we will remain standing for the Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol l'atei gedula l'yotzer reshit shelo aserem k'goyei haratzon v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama shelo sam chelkeinu kahem v'gor aleinu k'chol hamonon v'hanachnu korim u'mishkacharim u'modim Lifnei Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shehu Noteh Shamayim V'Yosed Haaretz U'Mashad Yikaro B'Shamayim Mima'al U'Shchinatu Zo V'Gavei Meromim Hu Eloheinu Enod Emet Malkeinu Efes Ulato Kakatu b'Torato v'yadata hayom v'hashevota elibabecha ki Adonai hu Elohim b'shamayim imal v'yala haaretz mitachat enod. To the Torah Adonai Yimlach Le'olam Va'ed V'ne'emar V'haya Adonai L'melech HaKol Ha'aretz Bayom Ha'hu Yiyeh Adonai Echad U'Shemo Echad. Can be seated. And this Shabbat, we lovingly recall the memory of our departed relatives and friends whose yahrzeit we observed during the week of the 24 Tammuz to the 1st of Av. Simi Dom, Francis Block, Irving Bromberg, Ira Glasser, Elmer Glick, Samuel Gold, Eleanor Greenstein, Joseph Kaplan, Edward F. Klinger, Ray Levitt, Sylvia Levinson, Joseph Lutz, Edith Moss, Rosalie Elseroff, Elaine Rubin, Howard Rubin, Henry Alton Shmulevitz, Aviva Raphael Shotland, Sheila Rose Seal, Michael Shaw, Israel Shepard, Lawrence W. Stone, Kenneth Tessler, David Sifrin, Morris Weiner, and Irene Calderon. And this is covered up. Okay, good. We have no recent passings to announce. And with that, if you are commemorating a yahrzeit, Morris Kaddish, please rise, is on page 61. Yikadal v'yikadash shemei rabbah, v'yalma dibra pirutei, v'yam lifma plutei, v'chayechon v'yamechon, v'chayech v'chol beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman kariv, v'yimru amen, yeheshmei rabbah m'barach, v'yamam l'omei omaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitba'ar v'yitbaman v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal, shemei dekudeshah parichu, la'elan min kol birchata v'shirata, Tushbachata v'nechemata da'miran v'yalma v'yimru amen. Yehesh lama rabba min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu v'yalko Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'ramav v'ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'yalko Yisrael v'yimru amen. May those who've come to say yahrzeit or who've come to say Kaddish for be a blessing to you. Okay, announcements. Tomorrow, there is mahjong after services apparently at 12:45. Mondays and Thursdays, 8 a.m., we have morning minyan. It is in the chapel, followed by a breakfast, which is in the courtyard. We have weekly text study, which right now is here until we find a new home. It's at 9 o'clock on Wednesdays. Don't need to prepare anything, just show up. What else? Next Friday, there's a Tot Shabbat at 5 o'clock, and the regular service will be at 6:15. And then also next Saturday, noteworthy, we have a guest speaker, the Israeli Consul General will be speaking, so that should be interesting. That is about it. Is a couple people who I don't recognize, which means nothing. Is anyone here for the first time?
I'm here for the second time.
The second time? Well, introduce yourself anyway.
I'm Meg. I just moved up here. I made a food service a couple weeks ago when I was looking at apartments, but I haven't moved yet. So,
Great. Thank you for coming. Shabbat Shalom. Nice to have you. All right. We will conclude with Yigdal on page 63. Yigdal Elohim Chai v'yishtabach nimtza b'yinetel metziuto echad b'yin yachid v'yichudo nelam v'gam ein sof li'achduto en lo dmut haguf v'eino guf lo na'aroch elav kedushato kadmon l'chol davar asher nibra Rishon bin Reshit l'Reshito Hino Adon Olam l'chol notzar Yorek Dulato u'malchuto Shefan Abuato Netano El Anshe Sekulato B'Tidvarto Lo Kam B'Yisrael K'mo She'od Navi Ma'abid Et Temunato Torah Temet Natan Liam Oel Hayad Neviyo Neman Beto Lo Yam Khalifa El Velo Yamir Dato Leo Lamim Lazulato Tofel Yodea Sitarenu Mabit L'Sov Davar Bekad Mato Gomel Ish Chesed Lemifalo Notain the Rosh Hashanah Berishato Yishlach L'Ketz Yamin Meshichenu Livdot Mechakeket Yeshuato Metiv Yechayael Berov Chasto Baruch Ateyat Shem Tehilato Metim Yechayael Berov Chasto Baruch Ateyat Shem Tehilato Shabbat Shalom.